What's up, everybody? Welcome to this UFC Orlando preview. Phil Murphy here alongside Brett Okamoto and Marc Raimondi. And guys, much like how it would not have been wise to have a big breakfast Thanksgiving morning, right? You got to leave some space. You want the turkey and the stuffing and all of that to really have its appreciation. You may not even have anything to eat altogether, or at best, you're going to nibble in the hours before the big meal. That's what we did on the Saturday before UFC Orlando, because this card, and I'm not going to go ahead and say it's the biggest card of the year. That'd be dishonest. We have had some multi-championship events, some recent ones. But boys, we'd be hard-pressed to find a fight night that is better from top to bottom than what we're going to see on the first Saturday in December in Orlando. Brett, I want you to play MMA evangelist for us. Like, if you have the elevator speech to a buddy who calls it like, hey, do you train UFC? Like that kind of level. What is your sales pitch for this event?
Well, first of all, Phil, anybody who knows you knows that you're having at least 3 full meals before Thanksgiving dinner. So let's start off. You want to be dishonest with the fans? Like, let's point that out right now. Phil eats all day long because he's working out all day long. But to answer your question about UFC Orlando, I got to be honest, this card crept up on me a little bit. Of course, I was looking at New York, and then there is one more pay-per-view, of course, with the title fight, and a lot of things, honestly, that we're already looking forward to the first quarter of the year. Some big kind of rumored bouts, a big trip to Perth. So this is the kind of card that can fly under the radar. But when I took a look at this card, yeah, this is a very, very solid card. It's an extremely solid main card. It's got a little bit for everybody. It's got, a tie Tuivasa, Sergei, Pavlovich, where these guys are just going to probably throw down in the first round. It's got a very, very high technical fight in the main event between Stephen Thompson, who is finally, I think, going to get a striking battle. It's actually something that he has held out for all year, is a guy who's going to strike with him. I know that this is a fight that Kevin Holland wanted a lot, even before he was going into UFC 279, was going to fight D-Rod. This was a fight that he kind of had circled on his calendar. He was hoping for this fight before the end of the year. So I think that there is a lot to discuss. I'm sure that we'll get into it, but it is one of those cards that kind of has something for everybody, and it does have a really kind of action main event, which, of course, everybody likes.
I love it. Marc Raimondi, cut the promo. Why should we be excited about Orlando?
All right. Well, I would say, guys, if you are a fan of fights that matter, fights that have significance, fights that have real meaning in several divisions in the UFC, this is the UFC Fight Night card to watch. And the reason why I say that is because Stephen Thompson versus Kevin Holland, it's a huge fight for the welterweight division because Holland is still trying to make his way in that division. He's a relatively new welterweight. And Stephen Thompson is a guy who, in many cases, if you can beat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson at 170, you're going to go on and fight for either the title or at least the top contender fight next. And for Wonderboy, it's kind of a fight to keep him, relevant in that 170-pound mix. And then co-main event is Bryan Barberena and Rafael dos Anjos. Again, that fight matters. Barberena's on a winning streak right now. He's kind of doing this almost like legend killer gimmick, right, where he's fought Robbie Lawler and Matt Brown in consecutive fights. Now he has Rafael dos Anjos coming up next. There's a good flyweight fight between Matheus Nicolau and Matt Schnell, and even going down to the prelims like a Tracy Cortez and Amanda Ribas, both really good fighters in the flyweight division. Again, it matters. The winner of that fight is going to be somewhere important in that division, and there's just a host of fights like that in Orlando coming up in a few days.
Marc, I'm going to follow up with you immediately there. Main event. Cynics would say Holland's won 2 of his last 6. And yes, there was a no contest in there, but he turned 30, I believe, last month. He's still young, and his trajectory can certainly sharpen up his takedown defense. And Wonderboy hasn't landed a takedown since, what was the tough finale at International Fight Week in 2015? It's been a while. Wonderboy, on the other hand, he turns 40 in February. Since getting that title shot against Tyron Woodley at UFC 205, he's 3-5-1. He's lost 4 of the last 6. So where does the winner of this fight, this head-to-head, Holland v. Wonderboy, stand in that very deep welterweight division?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that if you're Kevin Holland, you're trying to break into that conversation. You're trying to break into that mix where you're one of the guys being talked about for either a title fight, a number 1 contender fight, or a big fight. And Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is trying to keep his name in that mix because he's been a guy perennially who's been, around the title, maybe not getting the title shot. He did against Tyron Woodley, but even since then, he's kind of been in that mix, and he's fighting top guys, like Gilbert Burns and Bilal Muhammad. These are top welterweights that he has been fighting. And this is kind of a litmus test fight for Kevin Holland to see if he belongs in that conversation. We've seen many fights like this year in the UFC and in recent years, I guess, guys, where you have an older fighter like a Stephen Thompson who was established, who's near the top of the division, and then you put him up against a guy who's kind of on the rise in Kevin Holland, and you see what happens, and you see where guys are. It's an interesting fight to see, kind of just like, again, a litmus test. How good can they be? Well, if you can be Wonderboy Thompson, Kevin Holland, you can probably be pretty good in that division.
Brett, when we see sometimes grappler versus grappler, right, the opposite of what this fight's going to be, sometimes those guys just end up staying on their feet the whole time. I don't think this striker versus striker is going to hit the mat. You saw Holland's last 3 losses to Chimaev, Vettori, and Derek Brunson, all guys who would be more than happy to put their opponent on their back and keep them there for the duration of the fight. This is going to be stand-up for the full 25 minutes, right?
I would certainly think so. I mean, I would kind of almost liken it to what we just saw with Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira. I wouldn't say that either of those guys have a tremendously awesome ground game, but you saw it come up where in certain cases in a 5-round fight, it made sense for one of them to try to work something out of it. It happened to be Izzy that did it, and it won him some rounds. Ultimately, it didn't win him the fight, but I see it kind of, if we do see grappling sort of in that sense, this is such an interesting spot for Stephen Thompson, though. It's one of those weird spots, guys, where it's like, if Wonderboy loses this, like, Phil mentioned, he's going to turn 40 years old, and then he's lost 3 in a row. He hasn't had a win now in a couple of years. All of a sudden, people are saying, well, how's Wonderboy going to finish out his career? But if he wins, he's number 6. He gets a big win against a popular guy in Kevin Holland. And who's to say? And Wonderboy's kind of been in this position now for a while, where it's like, who's to say that Wonderboy Thompson couldn't beat Leon Edwards? Who's to say that he doesn't provide some stylistic problems for a guy like Kamaru Usman? That's what's been weird about Wonderboy, is because he's so good at what he does that he could be a bad matchup problem for anybody. So I think there's a lot more at stake for him than Kevin Holland. I think Kevin Holland is this fun guy. He wanted this fight. Even when they were talking to him at UFC 279, when everything happened with Khamzat missing weight, he was saying, look, I'll take this fight, but I didn't really prepare for this fight. And I don't want it to impact sort of the fights I'm getting at welterweight. I have some momentum going. I would like to fight a guy like Stephen Wonderboy at the end of the year. So even if this guy comes out and wrestles me to death, which he did, Khamzat did, keep me in mind for some of those fights. I don't think it should be really held against me. And so the UFC, I think, agreed with him, by making this fight. But Kevin Holland is fun. He's not going anywhere. He's going to stay very active. He can compete in different weight classes. Wonderboy, I mean, again, just the differences between a win or a loss. It's so crazy sometimes in this sport where we're talking about a guy who, he's 40, he doesn't have it anymore. Or if he wins this fight by knockout, hey, this guy could get a title shot in 2023. It's very, very possible.
Brett, I want to follow up on that. You mentioned, alluded to the stakes and for these guys and what we know about them, who they fought. Wonderboy, some TBD perhaps if he gets a win here against today's divisional elite. We know it was 3-5-1 when Tyron Woodley was champion, and then as he started to slip down the ladder there. But of these two, who to you has more hope or more confidence that they can string the requisite wins together to get to the biggest fights available in this division?
I mean, I would say it's still Wonderboy as of right now, because he's been there. He's been a former title challenger. And because he's way higher ranked than Kevin Holland is right now. So he's just closer to those types of fights. I think, obviously Kevin Holland can take a massive jump up. And because of the fact that he did fight Khamzat, even though he didn't do well in that fight, there was a lot of eyeballs that were drawn to him because of some backstage stuff and things like that. So I think it's obviously a big opportunity for Kevin Holland, but in terms of kind of stringing together anything and going on like a run, right now, I think Stephen Thompson is closer just because of that 6 next to his name. And if he comes out and he does have a great performance, and he's able to get, any kind of fight that's up there, he could literally only be like 2 fights away. I mean, who's to say that they wouldn't put him in with somebody, on a card in the UK, on the same card as like a Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman. And then you're basically just one bad thing happening to either challenger or champion to maybe fighting your way into this fight. Like crazy things happen in the sport. But right now I would say Stephen Thompson. But again, he has a lot more to lose. I think Kevin Holland can afford a loss much more so than Wonderboy can right now.
Well, in that hypothetical scenario, I think Holland would be the one more likely to poke the bear in social media buildup and put himself in that position to where if somebody slips out, his name is fresh on the tongue. But Marc, that aside, same question to you. Winner of this fight gets his hand raised. Who among these two is likelier to turn a win in Orlando into a winning streak of note?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with Brett necessarily, but I can also see a case for Holland here because that he's younger, he's a kind of a fresher name in the division. He hasn't fought as many guys at the top of the division like Wonder Boy has. The wrestling is still an issue, right? Like, if he runs into a wrestler in his next fight, let's say he beats Wonder Boy, that's still a hole in his game. And it's one that he has to correct if he's going to fight at the top of that welterweight division, which has Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman, Hamzat Chimaev. I mean, he just lost to Chimaev, but that's a division that is heavy with wrestlers at the top. So he needs to correct that and improve that to a point where he can stay off his back and execute, his striking. He's got big power. He's so creative and he's so, dangerous in scrambles. Dude, knocked out Jacare Souza from his butt. I mean, the guy is a dangerous guy in there. So I can see a path for him. And what you mentioned too, Phil, also important. He can talk his way into a big fight. In fact, he got into a little bit of a skirmish, or at least a little bit of a verbal altercation with Kamaru Usman and his team backstage last month in New York. Actually, was that just a few weeks ago in New York? I don't even know what day we are anymore. But back in New York, he was there with a few people, and Usman was there with a few people, and they got into a little bit of a tete-a-tete. Nothing physical, nothing like punches thrown, but there's a story there to maybe told, in the future with Holland and Usman. So he's that kind of guy that he's kind of a lightning rod. He's out here like, saving people and like, de-arming gunmen and stuff. He's an interesting guy, and interesting people in this sport seem to advance quicker than others. So I could see a case for Holland too.
Mark, you've already touched on the co-main. We're going to go there now. Bryan Barberena against Rafael dos Anjos, formerly the lightweight champ. You mentioned the Legends Killer tour that Barberena went on. His introduction to the UFC was as a live dog, beating Sage Northcutt and Morley Alves, both of those as 3 or 4 to 1 dog. That's what he is here against Rafael dos Anjos, who had a terrific start to his welterweight tenure, dropped 4 of 5, dropped down, and now he's back at 170. How much do you think a win over the respective opponent, Mark, in where they are and where these guys are in the ladder will reveal what we know about guys who already have a decent track record, a decent number of fights in the UFC? How much do you think we'll learn here?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because Dos Anjos is obviously, years removed now from his lightweight title run. He's even years removed from his welterweight run, where he was in the mix for that, that title as well. And Barberena is a guy who's never really made it past like what in pro wrestling you would call like the mid card. Like, he's kind of a mid card guy, but he's always fun. He's always a gamer. His fights are always exciting. So he has a chance here. This would be the biggest win of his career if he beats RDA. He has a chance here to kind of break out of that mold. And with wins over Matt Brown and Lawler and Dos Anjos, all of a sudden you start seeing, okay, Bryan Barberena is on a winning streak. I'm pretty sure he's won 3 straight now. This would be 4 straight. I'm not 100% sure of that, but yeah, I mean, a guy who's on a streak like that could certainly get bigger fights. And you always want a guy like Barberena on your roster, because, no matter who you put him up against, whether it's a guy on the rise or it's a guy maybe on the downside, you're going to get a good fight. The one thing that I think he has to watch out for in this fight is Lawler and Brown. What they're going to do. They're going to stand and they're going to bang, and it's going to be a really exciting fight. And they both were. Dos Anjos could take him down, and it could be a whole different type of deal. Dos Anjos is so well-rounded. He's really great everywhere. His jiu-jitsu is great. His wrestling is great. So something to watch out for Barberena. But hey, if you win this fight, perceptions start changing from being a fun fighter to being, hey, this guy's pretty darn good.
Yeah, Brett, same question for you. Barberena yesteryear, the upset king, the prospect killer. Then he goes to the legend killer. As the upset king, this could be 2 birds with 1 stone here if he gets the win. How much do you think we'll learn about Bam Bam? How much do you think we learn about RDA, depending on who wins this fight?
I got to be honest, guys, not a whole lot. I personally don't think we'll learn a whole lot about either guy. I think if Barberena wins, and especially, you have to, we don't know how he's going to win, but I think that even if Barberena wins, I don't think many people are going to be calling Barberena, a guy who has a real run at a title, a guy who's really super elite. I mean, he's going to enter into a different category of maybe he's going to get another fight that he would probably that might get him into the top 15, or that he'll probably be an underdog against. And this is nothing against Bryan Barberena. It's just that his track record, it's not like this guy's brand new. I mean, we've seen this guy. And I think more so, we'd be looking at Dos Anjos at that point. Dos Anjos, unfortunately, he really is one of those poster child guys of like, He falls right in between the 170, 155 pound weight class. Now he's back at 170. If he wins here, I don't think it's looked at anything more than just kind of getting back on a win streak and maybe the start of something. He's still going to have to get some big wins at 170, and that's proven hard for him. I feel bad for the guy. I mean, the guy goes back to 155 to try to make one kind of more serious run at it. And he's supposed to fight Islam Makhachev. That fight gets canceled. He's supposed to fight Rafael. That fight gets canceled. It gets delayed. He ends up fighting Renato Moicano, who we know is a very, very good guy. We just saw him pick up a huge win. He beats him, but then he still gets the same fight in Rafael. Like the guy just had very, very bad luck over the last 2 years. That being said, he's getting older in his career. He's reaching a point where it kind of makes you, how is the UFC going to matchmake him? This fight itself, I'm a little bit surprised in. Yes, it's a fun fight, but you would think that Rafael is going to start turning into the guy that the UFC looks to build other guys off of, and when certain guys reach that point in the career, that's when they kind of start to look at other options. I'd be interested to know how many fights Rafael has left in his contract. I haven't asked him. Marc, actually, I know that you speak to his team frequently. That's a question that I would like to ask him when I get to Orlando. But I think most of all, what this fight is going to do is going to put Rafael dos Anjos' place in his career. We're going to know what it is. Like if he goes out and looks great, maybe the UFC does kind of like say, hey, we know how talented you are. You can get those fights against top 15 in welterweight, top 10 in welterweight. And if everything falls right for him, maybe he can go on another run. But if he looks bad in this fight, I think we're going to be saying, hey, what's left for Rafael, and how is the UFC going to matchmake him? I think that's going to be a big question mark, is what are they going to do with Rafael dos Anjos moving forward?
Brett, coming right back to you. I had you guys each give your elevator pitch, your MMA evangelist, your cut the promo. After the main and co-main, what's the fight that should excite us the most?
I think for sure it's Tai Tuivasa versus Sergei Pavlovich. I think it's interesting that we're seeing Tai turn around so quickly. Last time Tai was on a roll, then he ran into Junior Dos Santos in a fight that I believe was in Australia. He was winning that fight, then he got knocked out, and it kind of turned into a tailspin for him. He lost 3 in a row, I believe, and then he got back on a hot streak, and he won 4 or 5 in a row. But then he ran up against Cyril Gane. So I'm just kind of wondering, how is Tuivasa going to respond to that loss? We know that this guy loves to have fun. We know that he loves to be in fun fights. I also think he could be heavyweight. Heavyweight is an interesting division, right? You don't have to be perfect to win at heavyweight, right? And so I think he's in a great position. All of these heavyweights kind of have some flaws. Like as good as Francis Ngannou is, who's to say Tai Tuivasa couldn't go in there, avoid some big shots, and beat beat Francis Ngannou? Who's to say that he couldn't get in there and beat a John Jones who hasn't fought in 2 years? I just think there's a lot of question marks at the top of heavyweight. And so I hope that Tai is not just kind of turning into this, let's go out and bang, dude, because I think he's better than that. I think he is a better fighter than that. I know that I love him for his entertainment quality, but this is a fight in which I would kind of maybe drag out the fight a little bit. Pavlovich has not been out of the first round in the UFC so far. So if I'm Tai, I would want to fight a little smart and see what that looks like. But knowing Tai, man, he might want to go out there and get it done quickly and try to do a shoey right away. And maybe he will. But I do hope that Tai is not just kind of looking at himself. Yes, you are a fan favorite. You're always going to be that. Regardless of what you try to be, you're going to be that because that's who you are. But I hope that Tai is still looking at his career very seriously, because I think he can still do some damage. I think he is capable of beating just about anybody in this division.
Yeah, both these guys know they're not paid by the hour. Pavlovich, 4-fight win streak, all knockouts, all totaling 8 minutes and 11 seconds. To your point, Brett, about 2 minutes and 3 seconds per fight. Tai, 5 straight knockout, 5 straight wins, a streak snapped by Cyril Gane by knockout. Marc, coming to you on this one. We saw Tai almost get the knockout win. He knocked down Cyril Gane, which got a lot of us out of our seats because one-hitter quitters in the lineage of Marc Hunt, it seems like Tai Tuivasa is keen for those. If Tuivasa puts that in a bubble and fights the same fight he did against Cyril Gane, does he get his hand raised here against a very dangerous opponent on a very short turnaround?
Yeah, I thought he fought pretty well at times against Gane. He kind of it ended up kind of being a wild sequence where Tuivasa got knocked out, Gane won the fight. But before that, I thought that Tuivasa was affording himself very well against Gane, and he was actually the one who got the first knockdown. And Cyril Gane is a guy who has a lot of striking experience, and he's really technical, and he's really tactical in his striking. So that's a good sign for me that Tai was able to get to him, knock a guy like that down, who can be very elusive on the feet, who, a guy like Francis Ngannou wasn't able to really catch up with as far as landing big shots. Tai did it. Pavlovich is a different fighter for sure, a bigger guy, more imposing guy. But I think if, like you said, that your question, Phil, is if Tuivasa fights the same way against Gan against Pavlovich that he did against Gan, I think Tuivasa does very well in this fight. And what I mean by that is how he fought Gan early, because he kind of got roped into a brawl. He had some moments in those exchanges where he did hurt Gan, but it was obviously Gan coming away with the big shots and ending it. But if he can stay away from maybe getting roped into a brawl and being a little bit more patient and picking his spots a little bit, man, I mean, he's got power, like Brett said, that could knock out anyone in the division.
And guys, we could talk about this card much longer than we're going to as we say goodbye. I mean, Tracy Cortez, Amanda Ribas is another one that would have been high up on many fight nights. Cortez having won 10 in a row, including a win over Erin Blanchfield. That's aging beautifully. And Amanda Ribas figuring out if her future is at strawweight or flyweight. She's 3-1 versus 2-1 in those two divisions. But guys, thank you so much for the time, and thank you for tuning in. Keep it on ESPN.com/MMA for all things leading up to Orlando, especially once Brett gets on the ground there. But for Marc Raimondi, Brett Okamoto, I'm Phil Murphy. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and enjoy the fights.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.